why do we have design guidelines? We have these all over the country. Many cities make them, and it's really to help you when you're in those planning phases of the process. Because we don't want you to go to a whole bunch of work and expense to plan a project and then come to the planning department and have Diana or one of the other planners have to say, oh, gosh, I don't think that's going to fly. That's really frustrating and expensive and unnecessary. So the city wants to provide guidance for you up front so that you have an idea of what you can and can't do, or should and shouldn't do before you start. The design guidelines, like it says, created to eliminate the guesswork. It's also got some really good basic information about the architecture that's found in the district, so you have a little bit more of an understanding of what that is and why it's significant. And in addition to outlining what things are governed by requirements or rules, we also have some recommendations. So there are things that aren't regulated by the city. But if you were to come and say, you know, I know that you don't tell me what kind of fence that I can or can't put up, but I really do want to do something that's appropriate for the period of my home, the guidelines are there to help you figure that out, and the planning department is there too to help you with that. So there's just a ton of information in the guidelines. The introduction has all of that basic stuff, and then we have the guidelines, which are the rules, good practices, which are the recommendations, and then some additional resources at the end. The introduction has the district map, the history of the district, and that thing about architectural styles found in the district. And I'm sorry, there should have been pictures up here. And then the guidelines go through 5 different categories of things. So we're going to talk about the first 2, streetscapes and exterior alterations specifically, and then the last 3, new construction, relocation, and demolition, are pretty self-explanatory. So let's look at what's covered in streetscapes. First of all, the size of buildings, or the size of an addition, the size of new construction. That's really important. And the city uses height measurements at several different places on a house to help determine what would be allowed in any given historic district based on what else is there already. So here's a picture of a 1-story house. We also have that information for 2-story houses. But we look at the peak height, which is that highest point of the roof. The eave height, the eave is that very end of the roof line as it comes down. So the height of the eave, of the main roof, and also of the porch roof. That's the porch eave height. We also look at the plate height, and that is the height up to the bottom of the ceiling on that first floor. So if you imagine that you could see through the wall of the house, you have the ceiling, or you have the first floor, and then you would have joists that either support the roof or support a second floor, and the bottom of those joists, the top of the ceiling, is where the plate height is measured. And those things are really important, because if you say, well, you can only have a 1-story house, there are a lot of people who would say, great, my story is 20 feet tall. And that's really a 2-story house. So instead of using stories, we have to use plate height to manage size and scale. All right, massing, that has to do with how much volume, how chunky your house is. It also is a way to describe the shape of it. So you can have very linear houses. You can have houses that are more square, like the American 4 squares that we find that are 2 and 2 rooms on each floor. So 4 in a square, that's how it's named. Massing has a lot to do with the shape of the house also. So we look at that. You've seen some McMansions that have like a million different roof peaks and all that kind of stuff, and that's a massing element. Height, we talked about. Orientation has to do with where things are located on the lot, and also which direction the front door points in. Most houses in this neighborhood, in fact, all houses in this neighborhood, either have a front door that faces the street, or they have one of those porches where the front door opens onto the porch, and then the porch faces the street. And that's great. Either of those are fine, but if you build a house that faced the driveway, that wouldn't have the same orientation. It doesn't interact with the street the way that other houses do. And similarly, we've seen some places that will have a house that presents just a solid wall to the street. And that's an issue too in terms of orientation. Got some of those over in River Oaks. Looks like the embassy, you know, or an art museum or a La Quinta Inn. That wouldn't be appropriate for Germantown. Okay, and setback is just how far back from the street. Where's that line? Okay, guidelines. These are the rules and regulations. This is what's covered. Porches. Basically, if you have historic porch parts and elements, keep those. You know, don't tear everything off and put on a new porch. If you need to replace some things, you can replicate them. But it needs to be the same style. Okay, exterior wall cladding, that's siding with brick. We've got some pictures in here of siding that's in a herringbone pattern. That wasn't historically accurate. Vinyl siding isn't historically appropriate for this neighborhood, things like that. And the commission does regulate siding. Now there is, unlike most places that will say something like no hardy plank, the city does make an allowance for modern synthetic siding. And Diana, tell us real quick what the specifics of that are, because I don't want to get it wrong.
If you have the historic wood siding on your house, you'd only be allowed to replace it if it's damaged beyond repair. So if you have some areas of rot and you can just replace with a few boards, the commission's going to say you should keep your wood siding, just repair it. If it's so bad that you need to redo it completely, then they'll let you replace it, and one of your options is to replace with hardy. If you had horizontal lap wood siding on your house, you could use hardy that looks the same. Hardy doesn't look exactly the same, but that is just something that is in our ordinance code, where different materials can be acceptable. And that includes vinyl windows, if they have similar profile to a traditional wood window.
Thanks.